Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Although I've had some odd experiences that probably could be considered paranormal if I wasn't so skeptical, I did have one particularly odd experience about 3 years ago. It's August and I'm a bored college student in his first year. Hanging out with one of my female friends who I recently reconnected with, she was gonna spend the night. Get it in our stoned heads that the best idea is to drive an hour and a half away at 1 in the morning to the site of an abandoned mental asylum in Illinois that was just south of Chicago. Screw it. I knew it would be a bad idea because I get easily spooked when high, but I said why not. Most of the drive is fine, just usual stoned conversation about random bullshit. Finally we get off the highway and ended up driving for about 25 minutes straight through what felt like an endless amount of cornfields. It was dark as fuck, and there were no streetlights to guide us on this gravel road leading into the middle of nowhere. I'm a bit spooked as we near the end of those 25 minutes, but I laugh it off to the nerves. Finally, we arrive in the town and begin driving around and trying to find the mental asylum. It's supposed to be one of the first building we'd see, but we can't find it anywhere. Check my phone again and see that it's getting close to 3 a.m. This shouldn't have been a big deal, but as we were driving around I started to notice something really odd about the town. At 3 a.m., almost 80% of the lights were still on. House lights, church lights, store lights, gas station lights, street lights, everything. To make it even stranger, there wasn't a single person visible in any of the stores or windows, despite having cars still parked in all of the stores. Now, this was a small town nestled in the cornfields, but it was just big enough to be a little unsettling. My friend is legitimately unsettled at all of this and asks for me to drive us back. I agree, but spot something even stranger that I should have noticed earlier. A little over half of the houses have their Halloween decorations already set up in early August. Lit jack-o'-lanterns, orange porch lights, and spiderwebs on the bushes. I'm starting to get legitimately uncomfortable. I really need to take a piss though, so I drive off to a park almost to the edge of town and get out right next to a cornfield. During that entire time I took a piss, it was dead silent. There was no life, no wind, no noise from absolutely anywhere in the town at all. I also had the most disturbing feeling as if I could get rushed by something from the cornfield at any moment. I got the fuck in that car and sped my ass all the way back onto the highway, never once looking back. Not sure if some of that was just stoned paranoia, but it was certainly unsettling as F. I felt like some weird fucking cross between Haddonfield and that town from Children of the Corn. I might go back if I get enough college buddies, but I almost feel like if I go back the town will seem normal or something. The whole thing was really fucking surreal.
This isn't the spookiest, but I'm lazy and this is the easiest to type. Be me. 16 years old, came home from hanging out with friends around 2 a.m. Go to bed and lie down facing away from the door. Still not asleep, not even really tired, I just want to get to sleep somewhat early so I can get a good start on the next day. Get a spooky feeling. Roll over so I'm facing the door, eyes wide open. Doorknob turns and door opens to just a crack, about 2 inches or so. Sit up in bed thinking my mom's checking in on me. Say, "Mom," but there's no answer. Get up and walk towards the door. When I get halfway between my bed and the door slams shut, as much as a door only open 2 inches can slam, anyway. Even more spooked. Flip light switch on before going through the house. My mom and everyone else in the house is dead asleep. Fast forward to last year. Married with 2 toddlers now. Laying in bed, not tired, but needing to go to bed because I've got to get up early for work. See the doorknob to my bedroom start turning like a clumsy child that hasn't quite figured out how to open doors is trying to open it. Assume it's one of my kids. I realize both of my kids are in bed with me and my wife because they were scared of sleeping in their room. At the exact moment I realize that the door swings open all the way. Nothing is there. I get up, take a leak, grab some holy water, douse the room, pray to Saint Michael and go to bed. My wife tells me the next day she thought I got up to check out the footsteps. She claims she heard footsteps before the door opened. Before this she thought all the spooky shit I was telling her was me becoming unhinged. She tells her family about this, and they give her the same patronizing crap she used to give me.
I used to have a job where I needed to travel a fair bit. I was working on cruise ships selling art in the galleries and was in Australia and New Zealand doing runs when I got the email. I was really glad because I was being transferred to Hawaii, and it was on my bucket list. I flew from Melbourne to San Francisco, to Lihue. This bit is kind of important. After a lost baggage and a late flight, I got to Hawaii at around 10 or 11 p.m. I called a cab and took it to my hotel about a 20-minute ride away. Once I got to the hotel, I tried to take money out of the ATM and was basically told I couldn't access my account. I was really ashamed that I couldn't pay the cab driver, let alone my first night in the hotel, which was pretty expensive. So I told the hotel clerk I would head to a nearby McDonald's to get some Wi-Fi and try call my bank back home. The clerk told me not to go because it's Lihue, and I didn't understand what she meant by that. After walking over 2 hours to the McDonald's to find the McDonald's closed for servicing, I was stuck in Meth Head Central. One was an older woman who followed me for a couple of blocks asking for change. Told her I didn't have anything to spare and said that's all right. I wrote it off, too tired to keep up with what she was really saying until I heard her mumble.
You know I can tell when people are lying when I touch my hair.
And noticed she was yanking on her bangs. Increased my pace, and I decided to walk to the airport to use their payphone because it was closer than going back to the hotel. The Lihue meth addict then said,
I can also tell when people have knives on them.
Now I didn't carry a knife on me. I'm from Canada, so guns and knives are really only openly carried up north when you go hunting. This made me nervous around her. She was one lone meth head, probably weighed 80 pounds, but I could see others skittering in between buildings like cockroaches. What she said next was what made me bolt. She stopped, looked up at me and asked, how could I have her papers? I didn't want anything to do with her. My phone was dying and I wasn't going to take a second to double check if I was going in the right direction. I just took off running towards skylights in the distance and hoped it would be the airport. Thankfully it was, and I finally made the call back home to Canada. My bank suspended my account because I had used my card at a San Francisco vending machine after flying from Noumea to Melbourne to San Fran to Lihue. They said they would sort it out, but it could take a few hours. Anything was better than nothing. So I started to make the walk back to the hotel, taking back around the town center to avoid the meth addicts. Eventually I got back onto the main highway, but it was so dark. Nothing out of the ordinary so far besides the odd wild chicken, or piglet that darted out of the brush. I got used to it. Here is where things get strange. I decided to stop and take a break on the side of the road. I knew I was about a half an hour away from the hotel after walking for about 2 or 3 hours, so I was glad to see the home stretch. I only knew where I was because I remembered a creek that ran parallel to the road. It went down to a ditch and rose up slightly on the other side into what was maybe a sugar cane field, tall stalks like corn. That's when I saw it. I didn't know what it was at the time, but its eyes were reflective like an animal, and in my head I thought, oh great, another pig. But this pig would have had to be enormous because the eyes were above my own line of sight by at least 2 feet, and I'm 6'2". I didn't stop running. I didn't survive the crackheads of Lihue just to be pulverized by some cryptid on vacation. I made it back to the hotel, drenched from the late-night rain in Hawaii. It was warm, but by the time I got back it was almost 4 a.m., and the adrenaline wore off. The night clerk, an elderly old lady, could tell I was shaken up. Gave me a towel, and she brought me a few granola bars and an apple after I told her the whole story. But I left out a bit about the sunny Sasquatch because I wasn't 100% sure if I really saw what I saw. Anyways, she booked me into a room, and let me have a bed to sleep in that night, as I promised to her by the time I woke up my bank account issues would be resolved. The next day went about normally. I did some shopping after waking up, still exhausted and jet-lagged, but it was good to sleep. I was still used to being awake at night after spending 3 months in New Zealand on a different time zone, so I would often find myself up late at night, working on projects, going for a cigarette, or getting some snacks from the front desk. I chatted more with the lady who offered me the towel. Her name was China. She was nearly 80 years old and one of the most incredible people I've ever met. She told me I remind her a lot of her own son, who just went to Australia, and she would have been worried for him in the same situation. Plans change and my stay gets extended for 3 more days in Hawaiian paradise. I chat more and more with China, and on the last day we exchange emails to keep in touch, and I felt compelled to give her this necklace I picked up in New Zealand as a gift that I originally intended for a friend, but decided China deserves it more. I'm home now, in Canada, but lately I've been having weird nightmares of the Hawaiian beast I saw that night in the sugar cane field. Woken in the middle of the night, I felt compelled to get down to the mystery of the thing and read about a Sasquatch-type creature of Hawaii called Ikanaka, a large 7 or 8 foot piggish, man-type beast with a gnarly growl. Here's where it gets wild. In some legends, Ikanaka is married to Hina, the Hawaiian goddess of the moon, who took this chieftain as a mortal lover but left him when she went to live in the sun, found it too hot, and decided to go saddle up in the glowing embrace of the moon. That's where this should end, right? It gets weirder. So Hina is apparently a pretty popular lunar deity all over the Pacific, and specifically Polynesia, where I had just spent the last 3 months sailing out of New Zealand looking up at the stars in the night sky, only to find out that in New Zealand they called her by a different name, Sina. Now, I'm not saying I was visited by an avatar of this Hawaiian moon goddess or anything whack like that. I just think the synchronicity of the entire adventure was too spooky and almost unbelievable. This is the first time I've told anyone this entire story. Not even my closest friends know what happened that night in Kauai, and it'll probably stay that way for fear of being labeled paranoid or sleep deprived. I know it's a long read, but for the people who stuck it out, thanks for listening. It's good to finally get this off my chest.
You guys ever come close to dying? Yes, 3 times. Why do you ask? Should I tell my stories? They aren't paranormal, I think, but still fucked up in a way. Be me. 6 years old. Playing footy with my cousin in front of the house. Having fun. Just kicking the ball from one side of the street to the other. Hear a car coming, but think nothing of it. We were just children in front of the house. Drunk driver puts pedal to the metal. Runs me over. My cousin was only 5 and was desperate, running around looking for an adult. Here's how the scene played from my POV. Playing footy. Lapse of time, It's like all of the 15 minutes before the incident were completely erased from my mind or didn't even happen. I wouldn't know any of this if my cousin and a neighbor who saw it hadn't told me. Wake up on father's arms, covered in blood and ragged clothes. Feel extremely light, as if my body was ethereal, not sure how to express it. Feel no pain whatsoever. Father asks me things. Respond to him, but his voice seems distant. My voice is very weak. I try to say something, but it just won't go out. Lapse of time again. Lots of people around me telling me I'll be fine. Another lapse of time. Wake up 4 days later on a hospital bed. Nurse changing bedclothes. She gives me a smile and says she's happy I woke up. I need to remain at the hospital for another 2 weeks. During the first 3 or 4 days after I initially woke up, I saw a very old man in hospital clothes pacing around in front of my door in the hallway. He only had one eye. The day before I'm discharged from the hospital, tell Mom about the old man I saw. She asked me what old man. Tell her. She says there couldn't have been an old man as a patient in that hospital, since that was a kids-only hospital. Okie dokie. Still have no idea if it was sleep paralysis or some form of trauma I experienced. Here's the second story. Work a shitty job at shitty hours. Going back home from work one day, Sunday 5 a.m. Trying to cross an intersection. Literally 2 blocks away from home. Sudden impact. Thrown in the air. Rolling over. The force is massive, like, I cannot explain what it felt like, but it was horrible. Got hit on the side by a semi-truck. I was driving a Corsa, my entire body freezes up and I hold the steering wheel as hard as I can. By the way, all of these I still remember, weirdly enough. Blackout while the car is rolling. Wake up. Glass everywhere, car door broken in a triangle pointing towards me. Fell from the seat, car was upside down, no idea how I fell, maybe I released the belt unwillingly. Blackout. Wake up inside the ambulance. Don't move. Can you hear us? My head. I tell them. Blackout again. Wake up inside the hospital. No pain. No nothing. The doctor tells me they ran a battery of all possible exams and I'm 100% fine. Asks me how I feel. I'm completely fine. No pain. Not nauseous. No headache. Nothing. I feel great. Police officers who found my car were still at the hospital when I woke up. They look white in the face when they see me up and laugh while talking to doctors. They ask me if I'm fine. Tell them yes. They tell me they cannot believe it. Show me pictures of what my car looked like after the accident. I don't have them, don't ask. Basically a ball of metal. Got out without a single fucking scratch. Still no idea how that shit is even possible.
Have a story of something that happened to me a few years ago. In my culture, witchcraft and the supernatural in general are just a part of life. I was born and raised in the States mostly, but I spent a lot of time in Mexico and my roots there run deep. My family especially is supposedly blessed with sensitivity and magic, as we have multiple curanderas, healers, and some brujas, witches. My mother especially has been able to sense ghosts and otherworldly beings since she was a kid, and I have personally witnessed some pretty fucking strange things growing up thanks to her. My dad was raised atheist and would make fun of my mom when they first met, but suffice it to say ever since I've known him he's been a full-blown believer. Anyway, this story happened right out of high school over the course of a few weeks and is relatively tame compared to some of the crazier shit I've seen, but it's the weirdest. 15 years ago, just graduated high school and decided to take a year off and figure out what to do next. Parents have property in Mexico City. 4 houses spread out across about 5 dozen acres. Lakes, creeks, thick vegetation and forests and cave systems litter the territory. The surrounding land is all thick forest with scattered homesteads here and there. Used to be a farm, but now it's used mostly for hunting trips into the bush. I decided I'll look after the place for the next year and just relax. The caretaker warns me not to go into the northern expanse at night. Tells me not to spend the night in the northernmost property. Why's that? Coyotes? Boars?
No, Mijo, they've been finding dead animals all over the Northern Territory for the last few years.
Puma?
Don't know, but they've been taking the hearts, eyes, and tongues, probably a Bruja.
Scoff and assure that I'll be careful. Say farewell and head toward the westernmost territory. 4 hours later I arrived at a modest mini Victorian-era house. Get settled and start cleaning. The caretaker lives in the southernmost house on the property. The nearest neighbor is 20 miles away, and the nearest town is 30. After a few days of exploration I spotted a herd of boars heading north. Jet home to grab my rifle and start tracking. After 3 hours I ran out of water, so I went back to a small creek to grab some more. When I surveyed the area to make sure there are no coyotes or pumas drinking spot something moving about 200 meters due north. Zero in with my scope and it's a dead coyote. Decide to investigate. When I get there I literally gasp and get lightheaded. About 15 dead coyotes, from pup to adult, still warm, spread around. From the looks of it they'd been dead for about 1 or 2 hours, shoddy but similar cuts from sternum to groin, no liver, heart, tongues cut out. Hear someone taking a breath, so I drop my knife and raise my rifle in the general direction about 20 feet to my left. Remember what the caretaker said about the northern expanse. I sense someone is there but can't be sure as the forest is too thick. Eykien anda. A few minutes of nothing but my own breathing, I slowly kneel down to pick up my knife and start backing up. After crossing the stream I lower my rifle and keep my back to the sun as I turn and book it. As I'm leaving I hear a grunting, almost cooing sound like uuhnng. Put my hand on my knife and look at my watch. 5:41 p.m. Think, fuck me, as the sun sets in about an hour and I'm at least 3 hours from home. Decide to crash in the northernmost house as it's only 30 minutes away. When I arrived the house was in decent condition. Grab some cacti as it repels a bruja from entering a room. Bless some of my water in some old cups and place them at the entrances of the house. Spread some salt in the room I'm staying in and draw a moon on it. As the sun sets I gaze out the window watching for movement. Fall asleep after a few hours. Wake up to the sound of the same grunting, but this time I hear dragging sounds. Rocks being thrown at the house. Yell out, I didn't come to disturb you. I don't care what you're doing out here. I hear laughing and maybe dancing. After a while the laughing fades off into the distance and it gets quiet again. When morning breaks I start making my way off to the southernmost house to talk to the caretaker. Confirm there's a witch taking animal parts, probably a young one, just judging from her laugh and the amateurish cuts on the animals. Tell him to avoid the northern forests and territory and she'll move on eventually. Decide to lock up the northern and western houses and move into the easternmost house as it's closer to the caretaker and farther away from the northern forest. Everything is all good for the next couple of weeks. I went hunting and explored some really cool caves and clearings. When I was visiting some family in town they were talking about the northern forest and the witch. Tell them I had a run-in with it. They tell me there's been an increase in witches for some reason as the surrounding towns have all been having their issue. Auntie says they leave the people alone but they've been feeding on fear. My cousin said he saw one driving down the highway the other day. Grandma gave me a rosary and some other supplies to bless my house. Head back home in the evening. As I'm pulling up to the house I sense something again. Put my hand on the knife and stare at the general direction of the feeling. With my other hand I mutter a few prayers. After a while the feeling fades, so I turn and head inside. For the next few days I found little gifts scattered around the house. Rat tongues, idols covered in blood, and carvings of what I can only assume would be me. So I respond by placing salt on the entrances, carving little moons on pieces of wood and scattering them around the property, and planting some aloe vera sprouts around the house. After a while I assumed she got bored or annoyed, so it left the head of a boar on top of my Jeep's hood stopped coming. A couple of weeks later I closed up the eastern house and checked the rest of the properties before spending my final night at the caretaker's house. I was in bed sleeping when I woke up paralyzed. I felt someone crawl into bed with me. I looked to my left and it was a girl. Not pretty nor ugly, just extremely plain. Except her eyes were a bright hazel, almost golden, amazingly beautiful. She snuggled up to me and played with my hair before she closed my eyes with her fingers. An overwhelming urge to sleep hit me and I was out. Woke up to my pants unbuttoned and scratches all over me. No blood, but they hurt like hell. Shit.jpg. As I was packing up and leaving, the caretaker said he was planning to ask his brother to move onto the property too. Told him I'll let my parents know and they'll talk next weekend. Swing by my granny's place to say my goodbyes. Before I get out of my car, my aunts and grandma rush out and ask me what's wrong. Say I'm fine, but they open my shirt and freak out 'cause of the scratches.
She wants him for herself.
Tell me I better get cleansed or my soul will be corrupted. Reaffirm and say I'm totally fine. I'll have my mom take care of it when I get back. They're adamant they do it because by then the damage would be too severe. Humor them just to ease their worry. Sit in a chair as my aunties and grandma cleanse the hex. Rub an egg all over me as they pray. Rub aloe vera on my scratches, then sprinkle salt. Give me an amulet of a moon. Takes about 2 hours, but I honestly felt better, which is weird because I felt fine before. I say my goodbyes and start heading out of town. It's around 7-ish p.m. when I hit the other side of the northern forest. As I look into the forest, I spot a white owl just staring at me as I drive by. I swear I heard the same laugh as it faded in my rear view.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.